Welcome to the Dissing My Ability podcast. I am your host, Ken Meeker, and welcome to 2024. We're going to kick off part 2 of my conversation with the amazing Liam Doyle. Something Liam and I talked about in depth is the importance of being involved in your community. Not enough people participate in local government, and that's really where they can have the most impact that's going to have on their daily lives. Absolutely. And so know who you can call, know who your representatives are on a local level. And usually they'll even be willing to meet you for like lunch because like they're members of the community. They're not far away and they can actually do something usually or work with you. And I think a lot of people take an adversarial view of government. And I don't think that that's helpful. Because if you go in with this, that they're your adversary and that there's collaborate, find a solution together. And because I think it's oftentimes there's something that can be done, and it's important to at least try, right?
Yeah,
it is. Switching gears here just a little bit. Something I can, and a lot of people with disability can relate to, is driving or the inability to drive specifically. Within the blind community specifically, it's beyond frustrating because we can't drive. You mentioned that you don't drive because you made a choice at some point in your life, and that was curious to me because like the access that being able to drive gives somebody, or the freedom, is something that I certainly miss. And so I'm just kind of curious if you could talk about that a little bit. What was the choice why you decided not to pursue like driving, and talk about that a little bit?
So, and this goes back to my sort of employment and my history. So from 2015 to let's say mid to late 2017, I was a member of the local disability awareness committee that the city puts on. I was a member of that for about 6 months, and then I chaired it for about 2.5 years after that. And from there, I was able to petition the city to create a position for me within the local government, and that's how I became the first disability affairs coordinator in Lafayette, Louisiana, and I believe one of the first in the state of Louisiana, if not the first for the state in terms of actually working with a local municipality. While all that was going on, I was, as I said earlier, in college, and so I was finishing up my associate's degree because I had started at community college, and then my intention was always to get my bachelor's and continue on and find gainful employment and pay taxes and be boring, and it was great. So around that same time, I finished my associate's degree after way too long. I started in fall of 2009. And finished in fall of 2018. So it took me almost a decade of just struggling and pushing through and not taking education as seriously as I should have, but I finally did it. And so at that point, what was then Louisiana Rehab Services said, you have a job, you have a degree, because I just finished my associates. And because I created that position for myself within the city, there was no requirement to have a bachelor's degree. So they said, from a strictly funding standpoint, you are considered, you're good. You have a job, you have a degree. So we can't pay for your bachelor's because it's not technically necessary for your career. So the choice that I had was LRS will pay for van modification for me to drive, but they do not provide a van. So the only way for me to be able to afford that as a college student and as somebody who had Medicaid, Medicare, and Social Security, which is very limiting in the amount of money that you can have and make, was to take out a loan. So the choice I had to make was, do I get a bachelor's degree and take out student loans to fund that? Or do I take out a loan to get a van?
Yeah.
And then have the state pay to modify it, and I'll be able to drive. And it was the most, sort of unnecessary, but also easiest decision I ever made. I invested in myself and my future and decided to get a bachelor's degree, and that has paid dividends far beyond being able to drive. It's definitely, speaking to the freedom that you mentioned earlier, it's definitely something that here locally, because of our infrastructure and our accessibility issues, it is more of a hindrance locally. But in terms of opportunity and freedom, it afforded me more than a van ever could. So, it was a choice that I made, and it's something that I'm kind of warming up to, but I'm also looking at the potential of just moving to a larger city with better public transit, with better infrastructure, and saying, well, I wouldn't need a car if I lived in a larger city anyway, so why not just move where there's better job opportunities than there are here, and kind of negate the need to drive entirely,
Mm-hmm.
and rely on really excellent public transit and really good infrastructure that we frankly don't have here in Lafayette.
Yeah, well, in a lot of places too. But I love that you invested in you versus, something that would have to have been replaced at some point anyway. Um,
Yeah.
I'm fortunate, but where I live in Phoenix is very deliberate because it's close. It has access to the things that I need.
Right.
And there's a lot of people in the country who unfortunately don't, they live in a rural area or some, any number of things. And so they don't have like a dial-a-ride service or any number of issues that can prevent them from getting food, just basic stuff. It's a huge issue that I don't think enough people are aware enough about, is just transportation. How to get from point A to point B it can
Yep.
take a lot of effort.
And the need for reliable public transportation, because that is such a not only a necessity but such a safety
Yeah.
issue to not have that.
Yeah.
Um, you know, I've had times where I've had to be on the sidewalk or in the street to go places, and none of that is ideal. I don't want to be that close to traffic because
Yeah.
I will frankly get squished, and I would rather not get squished. So, having that infrastructure and having those readily available accommodations, it's really paramount to quality of life.
Yeah. It absolutely it blew my mind that you had to be in the bike lane.
Yeah.
Like that floored me. I was like, what? And then the how much your chair cost also. You practically have a car.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And it's every 5 years. And so this car, like, I need to replace my car, and going into, so, you know, basically, the way it works is every 5 years you get a new chair. And so I was eligible for a chair in October of last year. And what happened was I moved in January of last year to take a job in Tampa. I was ADA coordinator for Tampa General Hospital for about 10 months. Unfortunately, that position didn't work out. But in that time, I was eligible for a chair. So I was in the process of getting that chair replaced, and had done everything, and my insurance through the hospital was going to pay for 20% of it, and then Medicare I was going to pay for the majority of it. And then I lost that. When I left the job, I lost that insurance, and I had to start over. So then I ended up moving back here to Louisiana, and because I'd moved, I lost my Medicaid. So I'm currently waiting to reinstate Medicaid to pay for the other 20% of a probably $20,000 to $25,000 wheelchair that I don't have the money to pay for even 20% of that. Because the way it works is
That's a
that's
lot.
how they structure it, where it's Medicare. If you have Medicare, which is the national insurance, will pay for 80%, and then either Medicaid or in my case, when I was at the hospital, it was going to be Blue Cross Blue Shield of Florida was going to pay for the other 20%.
Yeah.
Because who has an extra $4,000 to $5,000 just available to them? And this was right after I had moved. Moving in itself was a big challenge, and
Yeah.
and moving across the country, and it was very expensive, and so just my funds were not where they could have been and should have been. And so I'm currently just waiting out to either figure if I need to get in a chair and figure it out, or just if I do end up moving in the future? Do I just start over and start a new job and wait for insurance to kick in there? So it's a real sort of catch 22 in terms of like I need a new wheelchair as soon as possible, but also so many things have to line up to make that happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's just that they
And
cost that much is
yeah,
astounding.
and it is, and but the crazy thing about it is I am what I would consider, what many would consider from a medical standpoint, very low maintenance. You know,
Yeah.
in terms of what my actual like, monthly medical costs are, and certainly what I was told when I was born was that I was going to be much more severe than I actually ended up being. So, that monthly medical costs could have easily tripled or even quadrupled without even, without barely even covering everything I needed. So, just the idea that it's so expensive and so prohibitively expensive in that regard is really just something that we've made a lot of strides towards on the state level, and certainly as a country, I think we're more aware of it. But there's definitely a lot of work to be done still.
Absolutely. I
In that
mean, it's
regard.
you got to have it, right? I mean, it's like
Yeah,
it's not optional.
right.
It is just crazy to think that something that is essential is not only is it expensive, but you're left being and people on disability don't have expendable income.
Right.
It's like, okay, well, where are you supposed to come up with it? That's just crazy. Which leads me to my next question. Bad days are just part of life, right? And maybe people with disability have more of them. I don't know. It's subjective. But you mentioned that when you're having a bad day, you try to remember why you struggle and what you accomplish as a result of the extra effort. Something that I often say is that, disability can be a superpower at times. It's just a matter of how you frame it and how you view it. And I'm hoping you can expand on what you meant when you say remember the struggle.
Yeah. So from a very early age, I was brought up to believe that I could do basically anything. Obviously there are some very real limitations, but I was not limited in my ability to dream
Hmm.
and sort of the expectation for myself. It was never a question of if I would get a college degree. It was a question of when I would get a college degree. And,
Hmm.
I wanted to quit, and I wanted to, especially when I was working on my associate's degree and just having such a hard time with transportation issues and just different personal issues and things like that. And one of the most interesting things that happened to me was when I would graduate. When I graduated high school, I started in college right away, and I would have people who were 4 years or more younger than I was would lap me in terms of getting a degree. And
Hmm.
so, that really affected me because it made me think like, what am I doing with with myself and with my life, and why am I struggling so much when they're seemingly having such a great time? And the reality was that everyone's struggling. You just don't know about it.
Hmm.
So,
Yeah.
but I really, try to say, any kind of extra work that it takes for me to do anything is worth it because I get to do something because of it, right?
Hmm.
Because I never wanted to be one to just say, well, this, I get Social Security, I get Medicaid, Medicare, I get, XYZ. And unfortunately, people in that situation are oftentimes sort of forced to just carve out as best life as they can,
Hmm.
and just because of different uh circumstances that are beyond their control, that's the best they can do. And so I made a conscious effort very early on to as much as possible not allow myself to have that kind of mentality. And it's not even that it's a direct mentality. It's just like I was never going to be um content with just getting by. I really wanted
Hmm.
to be able to do things that were exciting and different, and set pretty lofty goals for myself. Which for anyone who doesn't have these type of challenges, like going to college is pretty standard, if not expected.
Yeah.
Getting a degree, like that's standard stuff. It happens every day. Like it's incredibly impressive, yes, But it's just so commonplace and so normal that I think sometimes the effort that gets put into that gets kind of diluted because it's just so much ingrained in our culture to
Mhm.
say you need a degree to succeed and it's going to do this and this and this. But for me, it was more of no matter what, I'm going to get a bachelor's degree. And now I'm considering my master's, and that's a whole separate internal struggle that I'm working through right now. Of being like, do I want one, or do I actually want a master's, or I just think I want a master's? And so but yeah, it's I'm actively looking into that, and so we'll see.
Cool. Like
But after that's
I
it.
love it. Being never settling is what I think it is. It's like
Yeah,
if you want something, try. It may not work out. It may work out. Who knows? But
yeah,
never say, this is good enough. You should never be okay with good enough. You should be okay
yeah,
with contentment and like I'm full, I'm happy. That's where I think that's the goal in life, is to get to that place, wherever it is for somebody, is to get there and to work towards getting there. Um, which leads me to a subject that I think anybody with a disability can have, is the necessary need for patience. Um,
yeah.
I think without it, I would not be able to stay sane. Um, and attitude, it plays a big part in that, and how your mindset is can play a big role. And you mentioned you try to stay positive for all the right reasons. So what did you mean by that?
You know, I, this goes back into again, just like knowing that number one, it's okay to want more for yourself, no matter what your situation is, and no matter where you are in life. Wanting more and then making that happen. It may not. It's not going to happen overnight. Unless we all win the lottery, and then if we all win the lottery, then it's not that special. It's like that scene in Bruce Almighty where he's like, "Okay, everybody wins the lottery," but then you end up with like $3, and it's like, "Well, what was the point of
Yeah.
that?"
Yeah.
And personally, I don't gamble, so I would even miss out on that because I choose not to play the lottery because it's just like, yeah. Anyway, my point is that was
Yeah.
sorry, tangent. You know, the I think that it goes into into what you want, and making that choice to even if you're not making the progress that you want and the time span that you want, because that's something I've had to deal with very much recently, because when I left the hospital in October of last year, I from that point and a little bit before then have been actively looking for work, and the amount of ups and downs that I've experienced in the nearly year long saga that has been my job search has been just I find these jobs that I know I can do very well, and I get very excited about them, and I think it's going to be great, and then it doesn't work out, and so I have to just go back to the drawing board a little bit and just keep working and keep plugging away and keep trying to find the right role for me that is meets not only my criteria for employment, but also my criteria for the kind of the environment, the city is something that I have to consider as well. So like there are so many different facets to that, and so remaining positive is in that regard is for me is knowing that trying not to settle for a job that I don't like just to have a job,
Mhm.
uh, but also wanting to make sure that everything that I do is moving the needle forward a little bit uh, in any kind of field. And so that's really what I kind of focus on. I want to make sure that no matter where I end up, I my positivity gets to help other people, and I think that that's really important as well.
I love that. I love that. Um, and one last thing, is there any thing else you'd like to share? Any tidbits or any wisdom that you'd like to impart?
I mean, what have I been doing for the past 45 minutes? I feel like I'm
Well
doing good,
said.
right?
Yeah, very well
No, I
said.
mean, I think the biggest thing, like I said, and I touched on this a little bit earlier, is to say that, if you want to advocate, do it. Um, Start small, work your way up, find small ways that positively impact you, and think for yourself in terms of what those issues are, and find that motivation, because that's what's going to pull you through. It's not the progress that you make. It's why am I doing this? How is this going to impact me positively? That's okay as an advocate to say, I am fighting for this, this curb cut, this ramp to be put in, whatever it is, because not only is it going to impact my community positively, but also it's gonna make my life easier. That's okay, especially when you're starting out. That's really important. Be nice to each other. I think that there, like I said earlier, there's this sort of natural kind of like mentality of like everyone is out. I have my opinions, and my opinions are mine, and anyone who differs from that is wrong. And there's this way of instantly identifying someone based on a couple of key factors, and I think that's completely wrong. You really have to take the time to get to know people and talk to them, and realize that the commonality is there.
Yeah.
Right. And don't be afraid to ask, because I had one of the best experiences I had as an advocate came in 2018, and I'm happy to share this video with you, Ken, and you can include it in the episode.
Yes,
I approached the then mayor president of Lafayette, Louisiana, and two sitting city council members. And what I did was, this was in my work to advocate for physical barrier removal downtown. We put them in wheelchairs, and I took them downtown. And I intentionally put them in the crappiest wheelchairs I could find, because I wanted to make sure that they got the full experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I had intended on them to go probably about a quarter mile downtown. We barely lasted down one street, and they're like, okay, wow, we're done. We have to turn back. But they got it. And it was great, because they were so willing to put themselves out there and try something completely different, and make themselves look a little bit like a fool, and just kind of put themselves out there and experience something new. That is invaluable. That's something that I carry with me, because like, you never know how someone's going to react if you don't ask.
Yeah.
And so try not to be afraid to ask, even if it's a big ask. Always ask big and then work your way down.
Yes.
Right. It's better to ask for too much right away than it is to ask for not enough.
Yeah.
It's kind of like the adage of, it's better to ask forgiveness than permission. But I personally it's reverse. I prefer to ask permission than forgiveness. But I think that people want to help, people want to learn, people want to be expanded for the most part, and it's just about taking the time to do that, and having the patience and the passion to do that. And it just
we're all people.
Like, think about how crazy it is that we have one mutual connection. Shout out to Emily,
I know, right?
Who is in a different state, who I've never actually met in person, and here we are having this conversation. Like, it's the most random interconnectivity, and this has been a great conversation. So just that sort of just complete. You have no idea unless you are willing to put yourself out there.
Yeah, I agree. I love that. And like you said, you never know. And so put it out, because you never know what's going to happen. So, keep an open mind and put yourself out there, because I would love if you to share that video, by the way, because I think I would love to see it, because I think that's awesome. So that's phenomenal. Liam Doyle, thank you so much for coming on the show today. And if anyone out there in the audience wanted to connect with you, where could they find you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. It's Liam Douglas Doyle. So linkedin.com/Liam Douglas Doyle. That's my full name spelled out. And I'll definitely email that to you and send it to you as well. And I'll also just, I'm around. So if you're ever in,
Awesome.
Cajun country in Louisiana, let
I
me
know.